Good morning, everyone. My name is Gonçalo Santos. I'm the coordinator of the research cluster Technoscience, Society and Environment of CNRS, the Research Center for Anthropology and Health here at the University of Coimbra. Today is a special day for this cluster, and I think also for CNRS as a whole. It's the day of a new beginning. A new laboratory is being created. We will not have the mayor coming to cut the ribbons, and we haven't invited the President of the Republic, you know, but it is a very happy day, and like all happy days, we need some kind of ritual jamboree, which I suppose that we're going to have a bit event here today. The laboratory is called Laboratory of Critical Studies of Anthropocene, and this will be the first of a series of events in the coming months to commemorate the launching of this lab. So the Laboratory for Critical Studies of the Anthropocene will be a space for transdisciplinary and multidisciplinary critical reflection on all kinds of issues related to the contemporary conjuncture of multiple social and environmental crises. The lab uses the term Anthropocene to capture this conjuncture of multiple crises, but we are well aware of the limitations of this term. And the lab will offer a space for, I suppose, the development of critical perspectives in defense of vulnerable human and non-human populations, and obviously in the pursuit of aspirations and ideals of social and environmental justice. I can think of no better person than Barbara Glowczewski to help us launch this critical lab of Anthropocene studies. Barbara has dedicated her life to the study of Aboriginal communities in Australia and to the study of Indigenous struggles around the world in defense of land and I suppose water as well. She's a high distinction emeritus professorial researcher at the French National Scientific Research Centers, CNRS, and is a member of the Laboratory of Social Anthropology at the Collège de France. She has started doing fieldwork in Australia long ago, a few decades ago, times when there were no computers, you were saying yesterday, and no telephones, 1979, focusing on strategies of recognition and networks shared by first Australians with other Indigenous peoples in other parts of the world. She has since extended her field work to other parts of the world. She has done field research in Brazil, filming Umbanda Transcult in Florianopolis. That must have been wild. And she turned her research as well more recently to other ritual healing practices closer in care of the land amongst alternative collectives in France. She is the author of many books. I'm not going to go through the long list of books. I would probably highlight Indigenizing Anthropology with Guattari and Deleuze, and more recently a book published in São Paulo in bilingual edition, De Vires Totemic, Totemic Becoming. I think it went out of print already, but it's available online. She has published over 160 book chapters and journal articles and made several documentary films that we were discussing yesterday. Barbara, thank you very much for coming. I welcome you to the stage here at the Colégio de Bento.
Well, thank you very much, Gonçalo, and to everybody who is here to launch this beautiful project, which is a real necessity in the current and coming days. Now, I called my today presentation The Relevance of Indigenous Knowledge for Political Ecology and Other Sciences. And I hope in the discussion to have a lot of feedback from you, not just about what I propose, but but also about what you work on or what you struggle for in relation to those issues. And of course, if you don't agree with some of the propositions, don't hesitate. Debate is always necessary to have stronger arguments than to defend them. So I decided today not just to talk about Australia, it will be important most of the time, but also to give you some insights of why I think that we need to think in a planetary way. And in the early 2000s, I created a program that was called Transoceanic, with a K, and which compared situations all around the tropical belt of the planet. Because even though every culture is different, the issues that all indigenous people and other subalternized people by history, colonization or wars face today, or just the greed of economical global greed companies, multinational companies, they have the same problems, and they share those problems because they have the same, they have the same adversaries to find strategies against the destruction of their land and seas and pollution and way of life. And just like Gonzalez was saying, I mean, we cannot nowadays, I hope you all agree, separate environmental justice, which is striking more people in the south or some other people in the north who are less wealthy than others, and also hit by in diaspora situation, running away from their home countries for different reasons, and social justice, which is more and more again separating the more wealthy people who are a minority and everybody else. So in this first page, I chose to present the work of art of a Polynesian artist called Rangitea Bourgeois Tiopu. In 2016, she designed this map. She drew this map. I know the screen is not so big. Can you see what is happening there? Can somebody comment what's going on this map? What is strange in relation to normal mapping? Well, I know that unfortunately Pacific Ocean is not very well known outside of the Pacific, or even in America they only know the coast of America and Hawaii. So try to travel to the Pacific. If I'm telling you this is the Oceanian continent, which is the Pacific Ocean, what is happening on this map? Come on, yes?
The map is south-north, and the ocean and the land is important.
Absolutely. So this is the intention of the artist to say, this is the world as is seen from her people, Polynesian people, right? Now, French Polynesia has over 130 islands, where in passing there has been 196 blowing of nuclear bomb, which has polluted the ocean, and also still 3-4 generations after is affecting birth of some and mothers and babies. This is the French, nuclear testing, but the Americans did also testing in the Pacific Ocean and the Marshall Islands. You have babies who are born like medusas, no limbs, no face, transparent, and they live for years. This is the world we are in today. So that's definitely about political ecology. Now, the intention of Rangitea's inversion, actually, so everybody can see now where Australia is, right, upside down. Up, here, okay? And it's blue, like ocean is represented normally, right? And you have the continents here, the Asian continents, and America, because America has the Pacific Ocean as a coast, the west coast. Now, normally, I don't know, maybe in Portugal you don't have that vision yet. science and the science of recent mapping, like colonial mapping, so 2-3 centuries now, have considered that the sea is empty, right? That it's dead. It's just and islands are like little dots, right, in that empty sea. And the sea is today more and more considered as dead because it's just a reservoir for extractivism, right? Lithium and other minerals that we need for our computers, unfortunately, and telephones. And so she chose to invert the colors to say the Pacific Ocean is not empty. The land is not a few dots in a huge empty water, but the land of the Polynesians is the interconnection between all the islands that Polynesians and Melanesians and Micronesians used to travel through. So the connections between the different islands, some which were inhabited, others not, because there's thousands and thousands of different islands, today 33 states, well, did not exist as separate entities. They only existed as a network for trade and for various exchange, including also the specific spiritual relationship that people had with all the life under the water. I mean, fish, of course, corals, but whales, dolphins, and so on. So this is why she did that artistic and political act of transforming the sea into different levels of depth, like we do with land when we use different green colors for mountains or plains, right? Different heights, but here it's different depth. And this was presented both in Tahiti and recently in Marseille, a city maybe some of you know, on the Mediterranean Sea. And it was created by Denetem Tuambona, who has a fantastic curatorial vision of connecting the art of different indigenous people or people who are in situations of being taken away from their original country, like all the African diasporas. Now, Rangitea says here, for the inhabitants of the Pacific Ocean, I'm reading the blue line only, maritime space was practiced, traversed, lived as the terrestrial space. Thus, migratory flows took place from Asia, gradually moving eastwards. That Polynesian navigation following the stars, this is how it developed. Among the Polynesians, the sea was considered the supreme marae. Marae is stone platforms and pyramids used as temples, spiritual and ritual places in Polynesian religion, which was completely destroyed, by the Christians, right? Missionaries who said this was not good to keep as a religion. And there has been since the 70s, a partial revival of some of those customs, and of course, in archaeology also reconstruction of the marae that were completely covered by forests. Now she says, you know that there is lots of wars going on at the moment for the oceans, and who is going to take hold of the resources. So she says, because of this tradition that the Polynesian had of considering the sea as a territory, would not the international waters then have to be Polynesian? We can come back to that. Now, it happens that Rangitea had the inspiration in 2016 of her map of the Oceania from this map that was produced by a Frenchman who was working for a humanitarian organization at the time in Palestine. And so this was published, you know, the Monde Diplomatique, which is, like a very main media institution in France. So the Monde is everyday journal, and the Monde Diplomatique is once a month. And they produced a sort of annuary, a collective book with alternative mapping of the world to talk about geopolitics.
Now, what was the intention of the man who drew that, Julien Boussac, as a humanitarian worker? He was lucky to access the statistics of passing through all the, where in Cisjordania and in West Palestine, people were having their land reduced, and so to be able to travel across that space, well, it became like an archipelago. So this is what you see here. In blue is the rest of what used to be Palestinian, but which is taken over by the Israeli government. And here we are only in 2009. You can imagine, if you go on Google today, that now it's very few little dots left there. Not talking, of course, about what's going on in Gaza. Now, in Australia, here we go, to Australia, because this is the subject, how Indigenous relevance, the relevance for sciences, whatever sciences, and political ecology of Indigenous knowledge. This is a map that was made to showing, I see there is 21, 24, there is 28 different oral history recordings of stories of different Indigenous groups in Australia. All these dots here on the coast correspond to different language groups, and of course there is hundreds of other language groups inside the continent. But here we only consider the Aboriginal people who are living on the coast, right? All around Australia. And they all have stories, different stories, that talk about the flooding that separated islands from the continent, right? So for some people, it's a gigantic snake that came and with huge power brought the rainbow power, which became a huge flood. For another group, it's a huge whale. Whales are huge anyway, but or it's a specific bird, or it's a hybrid, what we would call a chimera, but some sort of ancient figure that reformed the geology of Australia. But you can see here, geologists studied all these stories told by the Indigenous people, and they estimated, because sometimes, it's a very practical knowledge on the shore. People would say this is the trace of that ancestor, and this is where the water came in or came out, right? It's like a very precise cartography that each of those groups make of their coast. And in reality, here is 28 stories that all the Aboriginal people of the coast, which are much more, do have stories like that. And they also have, of course, stories for inside the land, because it is estimated that the separation of the islands, 3,000 islands, that are separated from the continent, that used to be part of the continent. This happened between 7,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago. Right? After 7,000 years were the last migration of new Indigenous people of today. But the oldest human bones in Australia, so far, because there's constantly new discoveries, is 67,000 years. So the oldest people of Australia are actually inland, right? Because the new ones come and settle on the coast, right? New ones, waves, right? 7,000 years ago, they come when the islands are already separated from the continent, right? 7,000 years ago. Now, how come Indigenous people can today tell stories which would be at least 7,000 years old? Is this oral transmission? Possibly, but not only. Because otherwise this knowledge would not be so precise. What it really is that at each generation they check up. They check that they see what the land is made for. And when I went in 1982 to this place here, which is called Mornington Island, the Larder people, that island here, on top, I was, excuse me, I made a mistake, this is the Torres Strait, here, this island here, Mornington Island. I was walking by the beach with an old Larder man, a man full of knowledge, and he said, you see, and he showed me the texture of the sand and the rocks, and said when you go on the continent, you will see it's the same, because this is the same land. Our island, through the part, the bottom of the sea that is covered, is the same land as the mainland, right? So this is the same logic, right? From a different perspective, that what Rangitea, the Polynesian woman, was saying. She said that it's because there was a practice of navigation on the surface that the land was connected. Here Aboriginal people say, because they know that it was part, the islands were part of the continent before it was flooded, that it's the same land. So for them, all the land that is flooded belongs to them, so the sea belongs to them, and they name different corals, rocks, which are covered by the sea, all through the year or only at some tides, with specific names, with specific stories. And so it is maybe 20 years ago that the first land claim for the sea was won by the Yolngu people that some of you saw yesterday, that we talked about in the second film, Spirit of Anchor. They won a land claim on their sea rights. And so that no boats, big, fishing boats that come and destroy everything, come on those shores and continue to destroy the corals and all the ocean life. So there is the reading of the traces, and the last thing, but we'll talk more about that with other examples, is the memory we have through dreams. So possibly, during one generation, nobody would talk about those stories because, for instance, in some regions it was forbidden to speak the language, to do the rituals that go with caring for the land, and to sing, and to tell those stories, which are very sacred stories for Indigenous people. So for one generation or two, nobody talks about it anymore. And a new generation comes and has a dream, which tells something about that. And there maybe is one old man or old woman, not necessarily of the same group, but the neighbors who had more luck and were not dismantled and were not forbidden to continue their rituals, and they will come and say, yes, you're right. The story that you dreamt is actually a story that belongs to your country. And we know because our grandparents told us, because we also have the rainbow snake. And after he separated your island from the continent, he came to us. So you see, it's like that. The whole of Australia is a weaving of those stories, like little episodes that different language groups have the care of in relation to their geography. Now, we're going in Central Australia with the Warlby people now. In the late 1970s, one Aboriginal group, the Pintubi people from Papania, started at the initiative of an adult educator who was not Aboriginal to paint first on the doors of their school and then on canvas those stories that I just gave you an example of, right? And the desert iconography is inspired on canvas by the sand technique that you get. Can you all see on the screen here? The lady drawing on the sand. For those who were here yesterday, remember when I drew on the board? Okay, so this is what you can see here. Nakamara has drawn several concentric circles here. It's a waterhole, okay? And then she draws the walking of a mother and her son to the waterhole. And then here is a fire that she lights. And then the story says, in fact, this woman was living with another woman, and the other woman had two daughters, two teenage daughters, and that woman, who was every day going away for hunting, she would open her legs, and an adult son would come out of her and go and hunt for her, catch a kangaroo, and then she would ask the son to go back inside her belly, and then she would come back to the camp at night, bringing the kangaroo, and always sit like that to the back because she had a big belly. And one of the sisters, who was maybe 16, 17, she has a dream where she sees tracks like that on the ground of a man leaving footprints, right, on the sand. And so she wakes up and tells her sister, you know what, I dreamt of a man, we have to find him. If we find the tracks, that means that it's true. So this is very important, this business about traces. Nothing can be proved except the traces. If you have traces, it starts a detective story. It's like dreams are traces. Nobody can be for sure for the interpretation, but you cannot deny the trace, right? So if there is a trace, then you have to find the truth. So they find a trace, they find a trace of the mother, which splits from another trace of the son. They follow up the traces of that man. They found him and they tell him, you cannot go back in the belly of your mother because you are an adult man, you're a hunter, you should marry us and not go back in the belly. Does this sound familiar? Okay. Now, they force him because he's a bit scared and so on, so they marry. Meantime, the mother waits for the son to come back. She becomes very angry and she kills the mother of the girls. This is like a Greek tragedy, no? And then, when the young people come back to their camp and they see the mother of the girls who has become the mother-in-law of the young man, the law forces him to kill his mother because she killed his mother-in-law. Okay? So he searches for his mother and he kills the mother. Familiar, no? So I have a book that is not translated in Portuguese or English, which is called in French Rêve en colère, Dreamings in Anger, where I talk about the anger of the spirits of the land because some rituals are not being held anymore, and so that's how floods happen, big fires, tornadoes, cyclones, and so on. This is what Aboriginal people say all over the continent. In reality, Indigenous people everywhere. And in this book, I have a whole chapter that tells this story. Now, the painting is made by the same lady, Barbara Gibson Nakamura, and she was like my mother. Since 79, she taught me a lot of things. All the community taught me many things because it's a collective knowledge, but she specifically was extremely bright as a sort of intermediary for translating complex concepts. And so here, on this painting, this is a place called Nunkadachara that she comes from, and she is the custodian of this place specifically because she embodies the spirit of that place, which are the black plants here. The people of the black plants were walking and turned into a black flood that transformed the landscape. We are now in Central Australia, right? In the desert. This is another place called in English the granites, because they're big granitic boulders. We saw that in the film yesterday. And this is the traveling of the possums, right? From west to east. And there was a big battle here. And the possum ancestors, or the pre-human ancestors of humans and possums, they turned into those rocks here. Now, this road here connects places of the wallaby ancestors, and you see here the prints of the wallaby, while all along here are the prints. They're very small, they look like that, the prints of the possum, and here are the footprints of the wallabies. It's like that, right? When wallabies or kangaroos leave footprints on the ground, it's a line of that. So basically you have the song line, because this is the story, but it's a long song. This is the song line of the wallaby and plants, and this is the song line of, this is the song line of the wallaby and acacia seeds, and here are all the women who are picking up the acacia seeds. And this is the song line of the possum and black plants. And this is the landscape from which that painting is referring to, all the granitic sacred sites. And here the women are painted on their body with the traditional body designs, which do refer to the same cartography, right? So before painting on canvas, women and men were painting the cartography of the sites that they are custodians of on their body, to dance and to sing. So here they are painted with designs referring to that sacred site. All the boulders are the petrified body of the ancestors, and they make a film to protect the place from being destroyed by a mining company. And in 2014, in 1984, it was the first video camera in the community, and so given to the school, and they made this film, and the mining company stopped the digging of gold specifically in that site, and it's still protected today. Now, these are two maps I drew, but this one was reproduced by an Italian architect called Carreri. So on this map you can see the Warbury names of some of those song lines that I was showing you just before through the cartography made by the Warbury artist. Roughly anybody in Aboriginal communities of the desert can paint, and has done. Nowadays maybe 1 out of 5 people paint, men and women. Actually more women than men. But there are paintings all over the world because they entered the art market as contemporary art and not as primitive, tribal or ancient. Of course it's ancient knowledge, but even the effect of those paintings is extremely contemporary, and so it's sold sometimes at very, very high prices, especially when the artists die. But anyway, it allows many communities, they have their art cooperatives, to have an economy out of it. There is also abuse of some painters by some gallerists. Well, it happened also in the West, that some painters were, we would say, in a way, enslaved to paint and not getting anything from it. Now, so this map here I drew for an exhibition in '91 with the names. So you see east-west the Changampa and Yawaki, which is the possum and black crabs we just talked about, and the Wambana, which is the wallaby, the green, the vertical one, and Molo, which is the acacia. But you also have lines which are called Ngapa, which is the water people, the rain people, who are the ancestors of the humans who today consider themselves as being embodying the water people. And so they are the ones who do the rain-making ceremony, or do rituals to stop flooding when it's raining too much and so on. And so on this map here is out of a digital tool that I developed. There's about 14 hours of navigation with lots of hyperlinks. You choose your road, and then it becomes red. You click, and you can see images, films, hear songs, stories, and have explanation about that songline and that country. Now, it's not a real map because it's a schematized map, Because at the time, when I developed that in the mid-1990s, people did not want it, I mean Aboriginal people, that non-wealthy people know where are the places. So it's like a topological map, right? So it's not precise where the places are, and it's only, I don't know, maybe here there's 60 yellow dots, while the Warbury have over 1,000 different toponyms, place names, right? So it's only to show how it works. But there is many more lines, okay, that connect different places, like a mesh. And from the south to the north, there is 600 kilometers here. And from east to west, there's 300 kilometers. And this is just for the Warbury. And the Warbury, today are 4,000, and it's estimated that at the moment of colonization, it was no more. They needed all this land to live, not just to survive, to live well, to live according to seasons, to travel hundreds of kilometers every year, to be on their own, to use the resources of some places in some regions which were their land, and then to travel to other people, to do big gatherings and so on. Now, Warbury people in Central Australia, men and women are attached to particular places because of their spiritual alliances with a myriad of entities having an influence on their lives and on that of the earth. These entities are regarded as, in Warbury it's kuruwari, and I translate by image forces, because the word kuruwari is used by the Warbury for any painting, even if it's not Warbury, or a photo. It's really their notion of image, but the image for them has a power. So the images that are maps are helping for the land to keep its balance and the health of the people. And the images now, the photos of the dead, when I started to work in '79, everywhere in Australia had to be destroyed or put away. Because keeping the image of a dead person, I mean the photo, was keeping the person on the earth. And was very painful for the relatives. So the taboo was that you must not look at that image. And you might say, well, they didn't have photos before, so where the taboo comes from? Well, it's an extension of the taboo on the name and on the songline. When somebody dies, his or her name cannot be pronounced anymore, at least for 2 years of mourning, and the songline that he or she was a custodian of cannot be sang. Right? So, these entities are regarded as image forces. So I'm talking here about the rain people, the kangaroo people, the possum people, the acacia seed people. They are singularized in specific places and embodied in all manifestations of human and non-human life, animals, plants, wind, rain and stars. So basically, everything that is named has its image forces that you paint on the body and nowadays on canvases. This means that each human being partakes of the same image forces, not with all the animals and plants, but only with certain types of animal, right? So in a society of 4,000 people like the Warbury, some embody the kangaroo, others embody the rain, and others some plants, right? So you need all this, and you need to marry with somebody from a different image force. Each one of us, they say that normally we forgot, but we have the same. Men and women is a dynamic constellation of image forces shared with specific non-human. So it's a form of theory of interspecies, right? Which is not with every human, with all the species. It depends on each person. The shared instance of matter and image forces matches the differentiated relations that each human being entertains with particular places. These relations rest on a very complex geo-spiritual topology. Okay, now the world we use two words, kanunchu, which means below, and kankaru, above, as geo-temporal concepts, enabling to make a distinction between worlds. On the one hand, the world in which we live, On the other hand, many other worlds with which we can communicate in dreams, or sometimes in a waking state, when we are drawn up by invisible gateways, specifically if you go close to the sacred sites, either awake or half awake. Dreamtime, Chukulpa in Hungary, is a multiple space-time. In order to imagine this geotemporal topology, we need to leave aside our conception of linear space, which is our history, right? That we are used to, of space and time, and let ourselves be taken to a universe of manifold dimensions. So it's not cyclical, right? We have that idea that people who were colonized by the West, they have no linear time because they are in cycles and they turn in circles all the time, repeating the same thing. No, it's not that. It's a conception that is much more close to conception of astrophysicians. So this is another example, like we had the geologists, now we have the astrophysicians, right? Who are very interested by those concepts, Aboriginal concept of a complex space-time that we can experience in some alternate states, starting with dreams. For Aboriginal people, as for many other traditional people, the universe is neither linear nor cyclical, and after my return from Central Australia in '79, I decided to translate Kankaroo above as actual and Kananshu below as virtual, which are very interesting concepts in the philosophy of Deleuze and Guattari. And now, all worldly life is a process of transformation from virtual to actual and vice versa. We saw yesterday something I will not show today because I will not show any films, but the ritual in which women start by doing this, calling the image forces out of the land to spread and fertilize, right? The energies fertilize the forms of living. And at the end of the ritual, this movement, which is to call, to ask to take those energies which spread and did their job to go back under the land, rather than stay out and empty the land of its energy, right? You see the resonance it has with extractivism. No extractivism. Give back to the land what you take. Now, another scientific controversy is the fires. You all remember there were big fires in Australia 3 years ago, and this was only in the southeast of Australia. And at the time, to make it fast because I talked about it yesterday, it was the media advertised the fact that Aboriginal people had a traditional land management system of small fires to stop the big fires. And in the north of Australia, it's been applied for now 20 years, but in the southeast, they didn't bother. I mean, the colonization is older, 2 centuries and a half, and many Aboriginal people were also forbidden to do those practices, and they were not revalued. And so now they are. There are new ranger programs in the parks to clean the land by fires, small fires, just after the wet season, so to prevent the big fires, which are lit by not good dry plants on the ground, so to prevent the big fires. Now, the fires are also used, as you can see here, in the indigenous knowledge of fire management. I mean, scientists have pretended that Aboriginal fires were responsible for the desertification of Australia, which is a desert 2/3 of the continent, and right until 20 years ago. So if you find text like that, in English or in Portuguese or in French, whatever, we all know that science is not necessarily truth, because as the time goes, not because of evolution, but the paradigm change, and what happens nowadays is that a lot of very, very old knowledge of indigenous people or other traditional communities is showing up as being more truthful than some of the things that the Western scientists said over the past 100 or 200 years.
So the relevance of indigenous knowledge to sciences is to participate in this debate, this critical debate about some scientific affirmations which in fact have proven a mistake. Right? And this is at the heart of political ecology. And there still are many debates which are not completely solved, because the debate about the fire is really recent, for instance, but there are many others which relate to everything, to agriculture, to construction, to how to look after the land, to the importance of insects in the earth, the different forms of agriculture, the influence of pesticide, what we discover about trees communicating through the underground, and of course in the sea. So there is heaps of knowledges, and it's true that those knowledges are threatened because colonial policies and post-colonial policies continue to do everything to not take into account those knowledges and prevent people from sharing them with their children and transmit them through means that would value them. So it's very important. Now, this is another example of another debate. You know, Aboriginal people are usually described in anthropology as hunters and gatherers. In anthropology here, do you study this kind of things or not? Because in some departments in the world, nobody talks about hunters and gatherers anymore. Do you? Can you tell me? Just yes, you do? And what examples do you have? Australia or others? Can you? Sorry? African examples like who?
And Brazilians.
Okay, so Native Americans that in the forest?
Yeah.
Okay, but
Amerindian communities, yeah.
which one?
Amerindian communities.
Okay.
I think it's most people in Portugal will
Okay, but Amerindians have gardens, no?
Yes, horticulture, a little.
Yeah, so that's been accepted.
Yeah.
They grow things, so they transform the forest, right?
Sand people.
Sorry? The sand.
Bushmen, yeah.
The Bushmen, okay, the sand people, okay. Or the Aka in the, so-called pygmies, Aka in Cameroon and so on. Okay, now, this used to be a very big field in anthropology, hunting and gathering, but it roughly has stopped in the 80s, mostly because most of these people were not able to continue their economy because of colonization and then the mining and, you know, and they were forced away from their countries, also by tourism, safaris or whatever. Now, and so they went to live in cities and change their economy. But the theoretical debate about hunting and gathering was considering that a few people in the world, who even though were colonized, were still having an economy of a prehistorical, a pre-10,000 years ago economy. Because at the moment, the science, classical science, not say traditional, considers that a sedentary life with agriculture and domestication of animals started 10,000 years ago. Now, this nowadays is questioned. And it's questioned by the fact that non-Western people are found across the world who were pre-10,000 years old and already had agricultural practices. Now, in Australia, I told you 67,000 years of life. They saw islands being taken away. They saw the extinction of volcanoes which were bringing fire everywhere. They saw the disappearance of a huge sea in the middle of the continent, which was full of dolphins, and they still have a lot of fossils of shells and so on. Anyway, they saw the disappearance of all the forests, and it became a desert. Okay, so here we see Walbury with, well, you see a goanna on the top, which is very nice to eat, and here, these are bushes of so-called in English bush tomatoes, because they're from the same family as tomatoes, but they grow normally in a wild way, right? It's native food. There are hundreds of species of native food that you don't find anywhere else but in Central Australia.
And so it looks, it's green, it's bright green like that, and inside when you open it, it's full of black seeds. And so it's very important not to touch those black seeds, but with a specific wooden spoon, you get rid of them and they fall on the ground. And then you can store them on a stick like that, right? Like figs or, okay, in here. And this is a canvas painting, right? With those sticks here, okay? And these are the women who are sitting with their boards, I mean their dishes, and they are picking up the bush tomatoes. Okay. I took those photos in 1984, and a few years after I came, this was in April, and we filled in 2 days a whole cattle truck of big drums of those bush tomatoes. Because those bushes were one next to the other, like a big field of grapes. They only grow in April. And so I come back one year, a few years after, and I ask, did you have a good collecting of bush tomatoes this year? No, there is none left. So I said, what happened? Is this the mining? Because there's mining next to it, for different minerals. I said, no, we don't go there enough. So what does it mean? They don't pick them up, they don't open them, and the seeds don't go in the ground. And so the bushes don't grow. So what is that? Is this agriculture or not? Now, there is a very famous Aboriginal, yes?
Sorry, couldn't it be seen as some kind of protection against white people? No.
Not to grow the bush tomatoes? Well, not really, because the bush tomatoes are very yummy, they're very nice to eat. So they don't have them.
Okay.
They don't have them, but and the land anyway, if there is mining, is destroyed by the mining companies. They don't. It doesn't matter that there are bushes or not. I mean, it's like olive trees in some regions of the world today. Sorry.
Everybody knows these tomatoes.
Everybody what?
Knows about these tomatoes.
Aboriginal people know, yeah. No, I mean, it's not like, it could not be an industrial, this bush tomatoes could not be an industrial, I mean, this desert is so rich in minerals. I mean, that's what white people are after, white or Chinese or whatever, multinationals, right? But the thing is that it's much more difficult. This requires a four-wheel drive or a big truck to go to the center. They live in a community which is far. Not everybody has four-wheel drive, right? And the point was that you needed, in a few days, at least 30 women to do that, like you do the picking up the grapes, right? So this has stopped. And when they go back as a little group to camp, they just noticed that there is not as many trees as before. And it's not because they have been cut. It's just that they don't produce. And it's the same for fire. In Australia, there are specific species of plants, seeds, that need fire to open and to grow. If there is no fire, the tree will be, or the grass seed will die. So there always was fires made by Aboriginal people for 67,000 years to assure that the seeds grow back. There's about 200 different seeds with which you can make bread. Now, but I agree with you, it's an interesting question, thank you, because there are things that Aboriginal people don't want to say or don't want to do anymore to protect some places when they can. So anyway, Bruce Pascoe is a descendant of 3 Aboriginal groups and non-Aboriginal ancestry, and he wrote a lot of books, poetry, and an essay called Dark Inu. And here I just copied the back of the book. It came out in 2014 and it created a terrible debate. many scientists accused him of inventing things. I mean, in the sense, inventing interpretation, because everything is based on archives. Archives of first settlers who describe how the landscape looked and what Aboriginal people were doing, right? For instance, where the big fires happened 3 years ago, the fires have shown that there are long construction of stones which were traps for eels. Eels, right? Like kilometers of constructions. Very clever way of trapping, right? Eels and other fish. Then they had in the southeast, because this was a very fertile place, they did not need to be nomads, semi-nomads like the desert people. They had sedentary villages with big stone houses like further north in Papua New Guinea or in Amazonia. Big houses for 40 people, right? Made of stone. The first settlers took the stones to build their own houses. So there are a few, diaries that say that, but it was like not something that interested the anthropologists for at least 3 or 4 decades, right? Because the paradigm was hunters-gatherers from the desert, right? Or from the Aboriginal people from the forest, like ancient forest, right? Okay, so he picked up all those things and wrote a very, it's a wide audience book, and there is even a wide version for children, right? To list all the practices like the one that I just showed you. He's not talking about the bush tomatoes. He's giving many other examples. I'm talking about the bush tomatoes because I saw it, So, but at the time, before I read Bruce Pascoe, I never thought about questioning the hunting and gathering paradigm. It was not really my problem, right? While I could have, but I would just say that and not measure how much it changes the perceptions that we have of the global history of economy, right? And so he said that in fact, Aboriginal people, if you take all those practices, were not just hunter-gatherers, but had a form of proto-agriculture. And many scientists in Australia didn't like that idea, because it was questioning all the career, you see? And the debate in 2014 in Australia was in the media, because it was a wide audience book, it was extremely violent. And during the mega fires, which was 3 years ago, it restarted. And there are some Aboriginal people, like other Indigenous people, or whatever scrutinized people in the world, who go on the side of the power. So there is an Indigenous woman who is with the right-wing party in Australia, and she said that Pascoe was not Aboriginal, because he was mixed and that he was pretending to be Aboriginal. And she said, well, in fact, we should make a law that everybody has to make blood tests, genetic tests, to prove that they are Aboriginal when they claim to be. Because the majority of Aboriginal people today are of mixed descent. But during census, they can point that they are Aboriginal. And then they could have some help for their children to study, to take a credit for a house and so on. Okay, because the history of occupation of Australia has been very violent. So this is part of all the reparation process. Now there was a big debate and the law was not passed. Right? And then a lot of Aboriginal people defended Bruce Pascoe. And there was a big opera made out of his book, like he became a real star, and it's now translated in French. It's actually a book maybe that would be interesting to translate in Portuguese. I wrote the French introduction. And what else did I wanted to say about him? Aboriginal activists have repeatedly highlighted the stone constructions. Even I invited some activists in the 1980s, and in the events I organized, they talked about it, right? And I was thinking, I work with the desert people. Okay, so that's the Southeast, but it's important for all of the country, in fact, right? All right. I don't know about time. How long can I be talking? An hour?
10 minutes? Yeah, almost. Almost
Okay,
an hour.
so you
We
want me
started a
to
bit
10
late.
minutes, so I will try to be very fast now. Okay, astrophysicists, I told you, astronomers, this is a very important collaboration with indigenous people everywhere for different reasons. Not just to understand what's going on Earth in relation to the rest of the cosmos, but also for the climate. And so, for instance, this is quite important because this is not just astrophysicists. There is this idea everywhere in Australia that up in the Milky Way you see the giant emu, right? Which is the darkest spots in the Milky Way as you see it in the southern hemisphere. Now, on the west coast, where for those who were yesterday in Broome, where my daughters are custodian of the country, where they were born from their Aboriginal family, there are big marks like that, which are in the shape of an arrow. You see here? And some are big like that you can only see when twice a year when the sea goes far. And the Aboriginal people who are the Jugun and Yarra people who are custodians of that region, that Indian Ocean coast, they say it's the giant emu. Now the specialists say they are feathered dinosaurs. So you see the giant emu is actually a dinosaur, right? Because those prints date from the dinosaur times, as they were identified by dinosaur specialists. And there's 21 different species from those prints which were identified in the sea, going kilometers under the water, because the water came on top of it. So these prints were left, these traces, at the time when the land was soft without water. And the dinosaurs came to Australia. So of course humans were not there. So this is again, shows, you cannot say this was transmitted orally from people who saw the dinosaurs, right? Because there was no humans. But Aboriginal people say, emu, for some of them, is our father, right? Grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather. We are the children of giant emu. So we are the children of the dinosaurs. So that's another form of interspecies, right? Because basically there is a continuity of life forms in its diversification. Some humans relate to the dinosaurs, others relate to what would be flying dragons, I don't know, which are like sort of flying reptiles. Others refer to the water as being their ancestor, others to fire and so on, and to the stars, okay? So there is a book in English, The First Astronomers, that is really, gives many, many examples like the one I just described. Now, I invite you also to, and I can send the link to Gonzalez to share with you, Ngurakolu. Ngura is the place, the camp, the home, and Wanta Jampijimpa, who is now, who was given an honorary title as a professor because of his indigenous knowledge in Melbourne, and this happened to several indigenous people in Australia over the past years. He was a teacher, teacher in Najamanu, in the community, in the desert, and when the internet started, he had this idea to give a lesson, and it's not long, it's maybe 7 minutes, where he draws 5 circles and connects them with lines, like in the shape of the Southern Cross, saying in the middle is the territory, and then the other 4 circles, they are ritual, language, kinship, and kuruwari, the image forces, which are the law. And everything is connected. And so if you break any of the links, any of the lines, right? Now, this is in the process, so the other lines are here, right? So it's like a diamond, like the Southern Cross in the sky. Well, everything collapses, right? If you use a language, you don't do the rituals, you don't do the painting, and you don't respect the family ties, not just between humans, but with animals and plants and so on, where everything collapses. And then he had the idea to do a festival As an anthropologist here, I did myself because that's how I'm situated. I'm always invited to dance and painted on the body. And so this festival, the idea was to interest the young kids. The older people dance, here the rope is the Milky Way, and the young kids do hip hop. But they sing in Wargri in relation to all this knowledge, so that's what Wanta developed. That's the Milky Festival. You can find his beautiful way of talking, like, it's not you trying to do the weaving, right, in relation to the itineraries, the songline. This country is trying to weave you, right? Try to think about what this could mean. To weave you, to make you adapt, make you fit in, so you become your home. Already inside all these Kuruwari low image forces flows within, you have to be the whole ecosystem of Jugurpa, the dream. And he says a lot of beautiful things in a few texts that you can find. This is some other examples of the cartography for yams. There's 3 different stages of how yam grow underground. And it's like a family, so there is some tubers that are called the fathers, others who are called the mothers, and others who are called the children, and they spread for kilometers as a rhizome. So Felix Guattari liked that very much. You can imagine. To me, it's not a metaphor, right? It's a mode of existence, and this is how, it's a concept, right? It's not a metaphor. This is how every dreaming is a concept, which gives some models of survival for the people. The emus, for instance, it's the male who looks after the eggs. So the law of the emu is not just to be the giant emu in the sky, it's also the male who have to look after the children, since until they become proper humans, right? Okay. A book also I recommend for your library that just came out, Indigenous Knowledge, and maybe this will come in the debate. You know, I don't know if you discussed this here in your laboratory that is being created, but what you think about wilderness, you know, all the theory of wilderness. Now, Marcia Langton here, the quote comes from her. This is the content page of that book. Indigenous knowledge, so there are different things we already talked about. I had no time to talk about health, but of course it's very important, both the knowledge of plants but also shamanism. And Marcia Langton is an Indigenous woman from Queensland who was the first professor at the University of Melbourne, and it's her initiative, this book. She also created an Indigenous knowledge program for PhDs in Melbourne. That started two years ago. And so she says that there is a problem with the notion of wilderness. She's not the only one to say it, because it excludes people from all the caring they have done for millennia to maintain the biodiversity, right? So this is, now very quickly, you see those 2 paintings. On the right, it's the Western style, I mean the desert style, with the people sitting around places, and on the other side is the style from the forest and the coast with cross-hatchings that we talked about yesterday. And in 1988, the desert people, the Wobi people and the Yolngu people together wrote a petition to the parliament to ask this, and this is the way they see the fact that environmental justice and social justice cannot be separated. So what did they want? They wanted a body that of national elected Indigenous people. It existed for 10 or 12 years, 16 years, and it's been dismantled and they have nobody to represent them. Then they were asking for Australia to enter the UN, the process of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People at United Nations. It happened, even though Australia joined later than the other countries that signed the declaration in 2007. And then in terms of social justice, they wanted something to be done against violence of police and in jails. 10% of the population nowadays because of the various waves of migrants, and they are over 70% in jails, and there is a lot of death in custody, both when people are arrested in police stations and in jail. And the fourth thing they were asking was a treaty that recognizes them as first Australians. Now, they've been asking that since ever. Now, in 2017, there was a big gathering of 200 Indigenous people from different regions. Again, they did a painting, which is typically a desert painting, and they wrote this Uluru statement, which was asking their sovereignty and specifically what they called the voice. They wanted two Indigenous representatives at the parliament that would not be members of a political party, but that just carry on and advise on what are the main problems of Indigenous people. The voice in 2019 did not, I mean, they were asking for this in 2019. Then there was the COVID, and it's only, there was also in 2019, before COVID, a meeting of young people who did a declaration for imagination, asking the Ministry of Education to promote imagination. We call on you and the education ministers across the nation to establish an imagination agenda for our Indigenous kids. It's young people talking. And in fact, for all Australian children. We urge you to give us the freedom to write a new story. It's quite beautiful. You can find that declaration online. During COVID, again, there was a destruction of a massive, a terrible destruction of a place, the Jukan Gorge, which is 46 years old, archaeological site by a mining company. And in October 2023, there was a referendum that by more than 60% rejected the voice. So the presence, the right in the constitution to have two people in the parliament who don't represent a political party, but just convey Indigenous voice. And well, too late, I have 3 more.
Carry on.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
I wanted to talk about this experience because I'm not a specialist of American Indigenous people, Indigenous people from the Americas, but I was invited to join a delegation of 5 Kogi people, 4 Mamu men who are the shamans and the Saga healer woman, who wanted to come to Europe because they say that the health of their country, the Kogi people of Colombia live in a sierra, in a mountain with a glacier and river, and it's a mountainous country, and they say that their country is threatened because of the general global planet imbalance. It's not just political, it's actually ecological. And so was developed a program of doing a cross dialogue with scientists to so they give the diagnosis of the health of the river Rhone. And there were different steps on the Rhone that comes from Switzerland all across France to Marseille, to the Mediterranean delta. And there were several stops on the way, and so I stopped with them. I was with them specifically in this place where there used to be thermal use of waters. Now it's not used anymore to make water that heals, but they were shown those waters, and they were first very upset to see that, like, the one on the left is a bit sick because of the pesticide, but the other one that they asked to see, and we just went under fences without asking the owner, who doesn't like people to go there, but they were very happy there because there was lots of bubbles, and the Kogi are trained into reading the bubbles, which tell a lot of different messages, both about the health of the land, the water, and people. Then we went to Corsica, and they had incredible things to say about the megalithic stones. You know, like, I don't know if you have them in Portugal. Yes, they are, and if there is knowledge kept about it. Now, Corsicans are rediscovering this, and there is just fantastic stuff being revealing also some rituals and so on, and how the stones connect with the mountains, with the water,
and they affirmed that for them this was like the heart of France, which is politically funny because the Corsicans want independence, but that this is like a hub, that all those megalithic sites in Corsica are actually connected with the other megalithic stones in Europe. And and they could say, well, this is a masculine stone, this is a feminine stone, and they would point to the mountain and say, well, this stone connects with that mountain there. It was their first time in Corsica. So the Corsican woman who invited them, she was just crying because it's what she knows as a mazzera, which are mediums, traditional mediums, but to have the Kogi saying that, so there is now a program to develop. So they return and there is more exchange being done. Yeah.